Everyone, the Red Dragon is upon us. And after Hannibal gave himself up in last week's mid-season finale, we now take a 3-year time jump. Hannibal, of course, remains incarcerated in the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane. He was spared the death sentence on a plea of insanity. And although both he and Ilana agree he is not insane and that he is something different entirely, what they think is irrelevant. It's the court jury that rule the case. And in 3 years, times have certainly changed. After what happened with Hannibal, Will decided to step away from everything. No longer does he assist Jack Crawford and the FBI in attempting to apprehend any killer that may be on the loose. Now, Will is married to Molly, his wife, who has a young child of her own. And to be honest, things are going pretty smoothly for Will, considering all the horrible things that he's been subjected to in the past. But as you'd expect, that didn't last long. Jack arrived at Will's doorstep having absolutely zero leads in attempting to find the killer without him. And Jack needed to know how this particular killer thinks, and only Will has the mind capable of performing such a task. And after realising what he may be up against, and the uniqueness of the Tooth Fairy killer, Will reluctantly agrees to once again help Jack. He knows that doing so may cause old problems to resurface, but the fact that he will be helping save lives and whole families at that, he felt that was a risk that was worth taking. Now, would Will be able to resist the urge to get an opinion from the one man who may be able to help them? Because, as he's full aware, to catch this killer, there may be only one man on the entire planet with the right insight to point them in the right direction. Welcome to the top 5 moments of the episode, followed by the overall verdict. The opening sequence was dedicated to introducing us to our new villain. Francis Dollarhide enters the series as we witness him prepare for what he is to become. He bought his fake teeth, and of course, topped it off by getting the iconic Red Dragon tattoo all over his back.
Like overused punctuation, the novelty of Hannibal Lecter has waned.
Chilton has such a way with people, and as he attempts to goad Hannibal with the fact that his novelty has now ran out, he asks him about the Tooth Fairy killer. He continues to prod and poke at Hannibal, telling him he was only ever an appeal to a niche demographic. And after a quick chat with Ilana, Chilton warns her to always be cautious, as you can never always know what Hannibal is really up to.
I would be cautious. The young Turk may inspire the old Lithuanian to keep himself interesting.
Dear Will, we have all found a new life, but our old lives hover in the shadows.
After opening Hannibal's note, you can see the agony that strains through Will as he really can't decide what to do. You want him to heed Hannibal's words and stay away, but with Hannibal being who he is and sending a cutout of the murders from a newspaper, Hannibal was clearly trying to tempt him with his same old tricks. It's been a long time since we've heard those words. We watch Will as he revisits one of the crime scenes, and just like he used to, he puts himself in the shoes of the Tooth Fairy killer.
This is my design. I can wait until I'm driven to it by desperation in the last days before the full moon, or I could do it now, while it might be of some use.
Will knew that eventually he had to do it. He had to talk to the man that could give him some insight to this very unique killer. And after talking with Jack, they both agree. The time was right for Will to visit his old friend.
Hello, Dr. Lecter.
Hello, Will.
My overall verdict for this week's episode of Hannibal is a 9 out of 10. Even in the future, with Hannibal now safely behind bars, the same glorious show still powers on as strong as ever before. We are now officially into book territory, so it will be interesting as ever to see how Brian branches his version of the story compared to that of the Thomas Harris novels. Step to the forefront Francis Dolarhyde, as Richard Armitage makes his much anticipated debut as our new serial killer, the Tooth Fairy. He may not have said a single word in the whole episode, but watching you can see him fighting with his own inner demons. This episode really did ramp up and amplify the horror elements, especially as we watch Will retrace the steps of one of Dolarhyde's murders. It was as disturbing as it was brutal. We're going to get to spend much longer with Dolarhyde than the movies have ever could, and from the groundwork that we've seen so far, Richard Armitage certainly fits the part. A great performance thus far. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we have now shifted 3 years into the future, and it was quite good for Will, to be honest, to have a wife, a happy family, and to not being tortured in any way, shape or form. Must be new for the guy, but at least he's settled in nicely. Out of anyone in the show, Will was the one who deserved some much needed respite. Didn't last long, of course, after he agreed to go back to the FBI to assist Jack. Hugh Dance's performance was top notch, as always. You can clearly see him fighting with the decision of what to do, conflicted between the two choices that are laid in front of him. On one hand, he wants to help as much as he can, and knows that in him going back, he will be saving lives, but on the other hand, him going back could end up causing more damage to him and possibly to others around him than he would want. On another note, you'll be pleased to know that Jimmy and Brian are back. There was no place for them naturally on the European chase, but also returning are all of Will's dogs. And apart from Dolarhyde, of course, Molly and her son also made their debut. And now on to Hannibal. So we finally get to see him on the other side of that cell. Mads has never been a psychopathic, crazed killer like Anthony Hopkins was. He's always had a very dominating presence and been a much more cold, calculated version of the character. We didn't get to see as much of him as we used to, but we've seen a similar situation before in Season 2 when Will himself was behind bars. Now, throughout the episode, we watched Hannibal engage with some of his former peers. He continued to remind Alana of the promise that he's yet to fulfill, so I'm sure that that thought will be etched permanently in the back of her mind. But my personal favourite was with Chilton. Chilton's ego had clearly propelled to an all-new level after having Hannibal the Cannibal behind his own walls. Well, I say that it's his walls, but more accurately, it would be his former walls, as Alana seems to be the new admin. An interesting change-up for the characters. We'll have to see how that plays out. I just loved how he continued to poke and prod at Hannibal in attempt to try and get some form of response from him. And you know, with Chilton, he may very well be right. The competitive vanity that may be felt with Hannibal could inspire him to make himself more interesting. So how did we close out the episode? In a perfect reverse scene to the end of Season 1. And we can only be hyped until next week. I personally can't wait for the exchange between the pair, and how their dynamic is once again set for a brand new layer. Now, there was this particular scene which I found rather amusing, or more the way it was described, When Chilton told Hannibal that he could only ever appeal to a niche demographic and that the Tooth Fairy could hit a much wider audience, I can't help but think that was a sly mention regarding the show as a whole. You never know, some people who've never watched the show before might actually start on this particular episode considering it's covering material that's already been established before. Of course, it will be a damn shame. These are different versions of characters that you're used to and have been established over 2.5 seasons of build-up. But you never know, maybe the Red Dragon can bring in a whole new crowd to this quite marvellous show. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. Continue to support Hannibal in any way you can, and I'll see you next week.